Hello everyone, welcome back to the podcast. I'm Adrian Lloyd. This is just my stupid opinion. So I ended up getting myself a few extra pieces of equipment. As you can see, I got myself a new chair. Looks very fancy, very nice. I like it. Also very good for gaming, I'm not gonna lie. Got a new mic stand and finally got myself a pop for my mic, so that'll probably help with some of my P's, because I've noticed even during editing that sometimes I'm hitting them a little hard and it's carrying through into the podcast, so hopefully this will help cut that shit out. And then I'm still waiting on one more package, and essentially just to make everything complete for now, what I'm going to have is I've ordered myself a little bit of custom made clothes for the podcast, so I'll have that on the go at the same time, so that's going to be kind of cool. That'll be coming in tomorrow. So tomorrow, it's the evening of the 22nd of April. It's the 22nd of November right now, so it's supposed to come in on the 23rd. This episode won't be out till probably the 23rd, I think, maybe evening of the 23rd, Thursday. So look, this week I finally went back to school. Actually, today, in fact, was my very first class, and that was a little bit interesting. I would say all in all, actually, my class was around the same size as it was before I left, so that was a little bit interesting. I was expecting some people to drop out, but it looks like, at least in my class, not that many did, maybe one or two. But all in all, everyone seems to be there. Yeah, it was a little bit awkward seeing our professor for the first time, because for our class, this was actually our first day back. Tuesdays we have off, so we didn't have any class on the actual first day back of strike. A little ironic, we spend 5 weeks off, and first day of class, we don't even have class, so we have an extra day off. So this will be my last little bit about the colleges and the strike, but I was not very happy with the way that it was handled, as clearly from the videos I put out, and I'm less happy now because of the way that everything kind of went about. They kind of just threw us back in, and it was sort of even though everyone's talking about it, it's sort of a nothing really happened type approach, as in they'll address it as much as possible, but on that they're trying to pretend as if it's just another week, just another day. In fact, my professor today, she actually ended up saying to us that I think this was a something that was reiterated to her through the faculty, or at least through the college, but what they said is, the situation is like an earthquake. We gotta pick up and we have to move on. I didn't like this analogy very much, because as I said to her in class, I said, with respect, we don't get to vote on an earthquake. Because I find this was a terrible analogy to use, or simile, I guess it technically is. But I think this is a terrible one to use, because an earthquake is not unforeseeable, but it's a natural disaster. It's something that happens. It's a tragedy to everybody, and everybody needs to work together in order to move on. To me, I think the better way she could have put this, the better analogy she could have used this as, would be whether this was like a battle or a war. I felt like I was in the middle, a civilian, a bystander, caught in the middle of this battle, while the two sides fired their guns full blast without a care as to who got in the way. Because in the end, we were used as bargaining chips. We were used as political tools. From both sides, don't get me wrong. But I'm curious as to what the school is going to do for the students to make up for this, because there are students who have actually opened a lawsuit. They're saying they didn't get the education that they were promised, and absolutely nobody got the education that they were promised, so it's very disappointing, the whole situation. What'll happen from this lawsuit, I'll be very interested to see. Will there actually be some sort of kickback? No, kickback is not the proper word for this. Will there be some sort of reconciliation for this? Will us students have some money given back? Because right now, we're the ones who lost time, and they're cutting into even more of our time in order to make up for the strike. That is the fault of the faculty, the union, and with the Canadian Employer Council and the colleges. The students we had no say in it. We had no vote. We were just the ones impacted from everything. And we were the majority. There were 500,000 students that were across Ontario that were out of work. Meanwhile, the union was representing about 12,000 people for Ontario, I believe. So that's a very big difference between the two. But anyway, I don't really want to stay on this subject because I've said pretty much all I can on it. But just being first day back, still a little bit of resentment. I'm sure I'm not the only one. So a little while back, I don't even think it was a month ago, we were talking about Dr. Jordan Peterson. He came up again in the news. Once again, he's under fire. So Peterson is not under fire for, well, it's nothing new, but essentially it's nothing that he even presented or spoke about recently. See, last year when everything broke about the gender pronoun debate and Peterson began rising to his stardom, Peterson did a debate with another professor called Nicholas Matt on TV Ontario. It's just a very basic channel that has Canadian shows on it, Canadian news, blah blah blah. Personally, I never found it that interesting. But anyway, this debate got aired last year at some point. I can't remember at what point last year, but it was between Peterson and this other professor, Nicholas Matt. They were debating the gender pronoun issue. So this came back up because over in Wilfrid Laurier University, a teacher's assistant, a first year's teacher's assistant, got into a lot of shit because when they were discussing gender pronouns inside her class and she was teaching it, she decided that she was going to broadcast a clip from that debate, which was actually a very good idea. We had two people on opposite sides. On one side, we had Peterson, who was completely against the idea of a non-binary gender pronouns. You know, he wanted the he and the she, and he's discussed many times his problems with the multiple gender pronouns. Essentially a lot like what I've talked about, same problems. And then on the other, we had a transgender professor who is arguing in favor for transgender pronouns. So we have two people who were passionate in their own sides, and even the other professor, Nicholas Matt, said during that debate that was very, professional, very friendly. There was nothing more to it than that. As I understood, the students received it well. Apparently they liked watching the debate, and they liked having that sort of engagement. And the whole point that this woman her name was Lindsey Shepherd, the teacher's assistant, the whole reason that she did this was to engage the student, to get them hearing differing opinions. She, in fact, is a self-described leftist. So it's not like she is on the right and is in support of this. She's a leftist who heard what Dr. Peterson had to say and liked it. Similar to what I was, only I was not a leftist at that time. I'd already made my progression back towards my liberalism, but I'm a center-left person who heard that and liked it, despite that maybe he has a more conservative message too, some would say. Although he gets branded as alt-right for some reason or another, simply because he doesn't believe with leftist propaganda. There's propaganda on both sides, don't get me wrong. But Lindsey Shepherd gets in a lot of shit with the colleges for this. She gets hauled into the office by an assistant professor who's also her supervisor and gets reprimanded for this. In fact, she was told that the way that she displayed Dr. Peterson's debate, Dr. Peterson's position, just from a neutral position, like playing devil's advocate for him, her supervisor essentially said that is akin to presenting Adolf Hitler in a neutral position. Yeah, he went to Nazism, but more specifically, he went to Hitler in order to make his point about Peterson. I'm sorry, but I think there's a big kill-to-death ratio there, don't you think? There's a big gap. I think, Hitler's up to about 50 million, and what has Peterson got? 0? So you can't even closely correlate those two.
Peterson, do you have any comments on the Nazi presence at your protest? The presence of Nazis and white supremacists assaulting people at your protest. Do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, I don't like Nazis.
To say what he presents, his position is similar to Hitler, is bullshit. He has never said anything of the sort. This is the sort of propaganda that we've got to deal with these days, is that anybody who is against your position is getting slandered like this. Peterson very recently was going through an incident where a group was putting up flyers in his own neighborhood, and these flyers that they put out were nasty. They said the worst things about him. They encouraged people to call the dean of the University of Toronto and ask for him to be fired. They went after his very livelihood, which they've already done before, but this was in a different way. They attacked him at his home, essentially. They went to where he lives in order to put their message out, try and turn his neighbors on him. And now, by pure association, this woman, Lindsey Shepherd, is going through a very similar witch hunt that Dr. Peterson went through, simply because she played one of his videos. Also, on top of this, actually, Lindsey Shepherd was told that the rest of her classes, she was going to have to submit what her lesson was for review and for them to accept it, so that way she could actually teach it. This is a sort of restriction that wouldn't be put on anybody else in her position, but simply because of her association with Peterson, and it's not even an actual direct association. Her association with Peterson is as much of an association with him as mine is. We're just people who have watched his videos, who like his message and what he has to say, even if we don't agree with everything. I've said before that I disagree with some of his views on religion. While some make sense to me and I do accept, others I don't. I'm sure this woman is the same way. But now this is going to be her career. She's a teacher's assistant. She's going in for teaching. But even at a university, now you can't even have that question. This is considered hate speech. There was a great quote. I cannot off the top of my head remember who said it. I'll figure it out and put a subtitle right here who said it. But the saying goes, cannot have freedom while looking for equality, and you cannot have equality while looking for freedom. I might be paraphrasing that a little bit, but we get the point. It's a very good saying, because if we do look at that, equality requires enforcement, at least to some degree. While a lot of equality has to do with changing people's views, people's opinions, people don't change that easily, and they don't change right away. So enforcement is one of those ways to achieve equality. And when you enforce something, you are taking away someone's freedom to decide for themselves. For instance, you cannot say certain things because it will offend somebody, it will discriminate against somebody, and that's not equality. We have to have a good balance. But in terms of something like speech, we have to have freedom. People are always going to say something that pisses us off. But if we start limiting what we can say, suddenly plenty of things that we don't agree with are off limits. Plenty of things we don't want to say, we have to say. This is why it's important. And this story right here is just another example how all this is eroding, how people have stopped caring. Somebody should not face reprimand for showing a debate, especially when that debate is exactly about the subject you are talking about. If you're talking about gender pronouns, then a debate about gender pronouns seems appropriate, does it not? And if you're not going to hold that debate in class, then maybe displaying a debate that other people have already have is a good idea. And what is the point of a university if it's not to expose people to other points of view, other thoughts? A whole point of a university is to challenge you, challenge your ideas, refine your ideas, but they have long ago either forgotten this or deliberately done away with it. And you most certainly should not have a third-party probe into you just for presenting a lesson like that, because that's what eventually ended up happening, is that the university decided they're going to have a third party look into this situation. It was a goddamn class. That's all it was. But people are trying to display it as some sort of hate speech. Don't you dare teach that in a school. The funny thing is it seems that Lindsey Shepherd was aware of what the universities were like these days, because she came prepared. During this meeting where she was getting lambasted, where she was told that what she did was the equivalent of displaying Hitler in a neutral position about how terrible she is for, you know, doing something like this, trying to educate young minds, she had the good thought to record the conversation. And I think that was probably her best move, because now we have proof. It's not just her word against theirs, which they have 3 in the room. They can say that, oh, how terrible it was. She displayed terrible things. You know, she told her students there are only 2 genders, which is so offensive to the whatever 0.01% of the population. But because you don't think our way, we're going to have to destroy you. But no. Because she recorded it, she released it to the press and released it online, and because of that, all of us can hear what was said, and we can hear the ridiculousness of what went on in that meeting. I'll end up linking it in the description below towards the video. It's about a 40-minute video. I didn't end up watching the whole thing. I sort of skimmed through it to get most of the details. I just wasn't going to sit there and listen to a 40-minute conversation. I'm sorry. So when all this happened, of course there was public outrage. All of the professors that have been fighting back against this postmodernist, Marxist philosophies that have been infecting the universities, they of course jumped all over this. So you had Peterson, who made a quote on this. Gadsad had to jump in on it, and several other professors. Some I didn't know who they were, but clearly they're in the fight some way. And even on Peterson's YouTube channel, he has a section, a playlist, where he talks to professors who are dealing with their own political correctness inside universities across America and Canada. I think they're mostly Canadian because he is Canadian, but he does talk to people all over North America, so it ranges. So they jumped on this. Every free thinker jumped on top of this. Everybody who can even think a little bit for themselves jumped on top of this because they realize that it's retarded. It's stupid to make a huge deal out of something this small. I mean, I'm sure that when I was going through high school, middle school, there were movies I probably should not have seen. Not even that they were that bad, such as completely bloody shoot 'em up, but sometimes they had a little bit of language, you know, maybe for some, when you're kids at that time, you shouldn't be hearing inside a classroom. But I gotta tell you, a debate on gender pronouns seems like the less threatening thing you could possibly show inside a class. I remember when I was in, I don't remember which grade, but when I was in high school, we ended up watching a movie that detailed in pretty graphically the treatment of Aboriginal Australians when they were being put in their own residential schools. We have our own problem in Canada with that, but of course Australia has its own problem with that too. That was pretty graphic. If anything, that would probably be a movie that should have caused more people to be upset about than a debate on gender pronouns. And I think for a lot of people, it was this reference to Hitler that really got to them, because it shows the ridiculous of it. Peterson is very popular. He's very popular with young people. So you're trying to go after his demographic when you're attacking him like this. While, don't get me wrong, there's still plenty of young people that don't like him who are generally on the far left. He has strong enough support inside the universities, mainly in Toronto especially. He would have a lot of support there. He's got enough support that to try and attack him like this, to try and tear him down so easily by calling him Hitler, it's not going to work. While it can work with some and say, oh, they're Hitler, you know, they're Nazis, which has worked for people in the past many times, it's not going to work here. He's too popular, he's too well known, he's too liked. This isn't Richard Spencer you're dealing with. This isn't even someone like Donald Trump who's so polarizing that you either love him or you hate him. This is a man that are being told is a terrible person, part of the far alt-right white supremacist movement, like one of their leaders. Yet you listen to him talk, he's calm, he's a little bit shy, he's a little bit, you know, self-conscious. He just seems like a pretty harmless guy, all in all. But they're trying to paint him as if he is this dark, evil character, as if he's this Emperor Palpatine of the alt-right or something like that. Meanwhile, he tries to preach scientific thought, critical thinking, and, yes, religion, which are usually the videos I've seen less of his religious videos, but I still watch his religious videos because I'm interested in his point of view. At the same time, he's got great arguments. It'd be a good idea to watch them and figure out some great counterpoints to those arguments too, from the other side. But regardless whether you are what side of religion you fall under, he makes great points about society. He makes the great points about individualism. He makes great points about morality. What is the alt-right concerned with? White genocide. Blacks and Latinos taking our job. Shutting down immigration. Those are the sort of thing the alt-right are concerned about. Peterson has never been one of those. But this whole situation is once again livening up debate about free speech in colleges. I mean, if now we can't even present debates that are being put on public television, how far can this censorship go? It's times like this where, as controversial of an issue as it might sound, it may actually be a good idea for somebody to do what Andrew Scheer wants to do, leader of the Conservative Party of Canada. He's talked about that one of his platforms is that he wants to defund and cut funding to colleges and universities that don't foster a free speech environment. Now, that seems pretty harsh to say, whoa, you're going to cut off funding to them? And again, I don't even think he's talking about cutting off all funding. I think he's just talking about cutting their funding. While it may seem harsh, this is actually a really good idea. In fact, this is an idea Peterson himself has said, although he didn't say cut the funding to the universities so much as he said cut the funding to the humanities. Because he said let them fight it out and figure out which ones are really important. And that's sort of the same sort of thing. If you're not going to foster a free speech environment and you're going to stifle free speech, which even can include scientific fact, for the sake of PC bullshit, well, then maybe the best thing to do is to cut the funding. Because if those are so important, then they don't have to worry about themselves. As in, if those courses are so important, if women's studies is so important, or race issues are so important, or something along those lines, gender issues are so important, then they don't have to worry because the funding will be there. The only time they would have to worry is if they're actually pretty insignificant courses. I mean, do you think the trades would be worried about having their funding cut if something like that happened? Well, of course, if we're talking about the whole college, everyone would be concerned with funding cut. But do you think the trades are super worried that all of a sudden they're just going to have a bunch of their funding cut and a bunch of them are going to be gone? No, because we need the trades right now. The trades are important. And if we did that, we would literally only be destroying our own future. So maybe this isn't such a bad idea to cut public funding. Besides, maybe these universities should be able to sponsor their own. And I suppose they say, well, if you do that, they're just going to charge up the ass for commission. Yes, well, there are a lot of other options for schools out there. They'll end up doing it to themselves because they're not going to want to foster a free speech attitude. They're going to get their funding cut. They'll start charging up the ass for tuition and textbooks and all other things they can, and nobody's going to go there. Because if it's only a mediocre school to begin with, why go there? The other thing is, Scheer at no point said, let the university or the college fall apart. He never said, we're going to cut your funding, you're on your own, and, if you fall, you fall. He would essentially, it would more be a scare tactic, Almost like the sort of, you push someone and grab them, and it's like the saved your life type thing. You cut their funding, you let them sweat it out until they're willing to come around. Put the funding back in. That's really what I think Scheer would do. He wouldn't actually be, okay, you don't foster free speech, all right, you're cut forever. He just needs them to come around. Well, this would benefit a lot of people on the right because some things like pro-life groups are being censored on university campuses or stuff like that. It will benefit everybody to have this sort of ideal. it's good to have it anywhere. Because if you do find yourself on the other side, where you are the minority, whether you be a liberal or conservative, do you want to be censored? I think that's one of the reasons we do find so many conservatives on campus and in other areas where it's pretty much dominated by liberals. They do have such a care about free speech. Because they are people who can have their opinion shot down simply because people don't agree with it. Now, this falls on the other side, too. If you happen to be on the liberal side, the same thing can happen. If you are all around by conservatives, you can get shot down. A good example of this would be if you happen to find yourself with a bunch of religious groups and you are somebody like an agnostic or an atheist or a secularist who doesn't believe. Well, then you can easily get overruled. Do you want to have your opinion shut down, or do you want to be able to speak your mind whenever you want? Personally, I want to be able to speak my mind wherever I want and not worry about the consequences simply because someone else doesn't agree. So, in the end, the university ended up apologizing to Lindsey Shepherd for everything that they put her through. This was after a lot of pressure was put on them, both by the media and also by people on social media and, just in general. This was after they put a lot of pressure on them in order to change their ways. One thing that ended up happening is about 100 Wilfrid Laurier alumni threatened to pull their funding from the university and also threatened to not send their children there because of what was going on. It was a huge embarrassment for Wilfrid Laurier, and they completely did it to themselves. It didn't have to be this way. Nobody made an issue out of the debate. But once they got wind of it, they decided that they had to go and, give her a finger wagging. I hope that universities and colleges will learn from this, because at this point, it's getting a little ridiculous. And we see how it's starting to backfire on them, so there's no point for them to keep pulling this bullshit. They're losing. They're losing when they do this. Because people are tired of it. And I think one reason that we're seeing a big pushback from the younger generation too, while a lot have gotten deeper into their progressiveness, we've seen a big segment of young people that have made a turnaround and said, fuck this shit. I think it's because a lot of us were just raised under it. It was PC bullshit everywhere we went from the time we were born. Even some of our parenting, the way we did stuff was PC these days. I'm not talking at all about like smacking your kid. I don't mean that at all. But I mean the way you were supposed to handle your kid was very PC, You shouldn't really get mad at them. You should try and, try and make them understand would be a good one. Which, of course, you always got to try and make them understand. But with a kid, you need a firm hand sometimes. Just as an example, there are plenty others. And then we get into schools where there's a lot of PC culture, and a lot of this attitude has infested itself into the workplace by the time we get there, that we've just been surrounded by it. And it's just, enough's enough. Like, how long are everybody supposed to be told that they're terrible people just because they don't foster the exact same point of view as everybody else? So I wish I could say that this was the end of the attacks on Peterson for this week, but unfortunately it wasn't. Some people in the media decided to take another shot at him, and this time it was over a website that he is creating. He announced sometime in August that he was going to be releasing a website, and what the point of this website was so you could, a student could go in and they could put in their school, or they could put in and their classes and this, that, and the other. They can put in basic information about the colleges and universities. And then what this website was supposed to do was it was supposed to analyze all the information from the colleges, and it was supposed to get you back as to how deep it was in cultural Marxism, postmodernism, so that way people could decide where they wanted to go in order to get their education. I mean, when we look at when we're applying for colleges, university, they give you all these fancy, come here and make your future, and all these smiling people of, I've had a great education here. But you know what? Same people who did that is like people who did Everest College. They always did that, where they say like, oh, you know what? You need to get your life on track. Call us. We'll help you out. But then it turned out to be a big fucking scam. So just because you make a commercial with smiling people and say, I had a great life, doesn't mean that you offer quality education. It just proves that a few people have done well. I think another example of this was ITT Tech. I could be wrong, but I think a lot of people had a big problem with ITT Tech and said it wasn't a very good school from what I hear. So in this day and age, it's actually a really good idea, especially when we have stories such as the Wilfrid Laurier University story. I keep wanting to call it a college, but it's a university. Like a story like that, a website like this seems pretty relevant. I mean, wouldn't you like to go to a school where you know that something like this is not going to happen? I would. If that was what I was going in for, damn right I would. But instead, what he's doing, people decided to put that in the crosshair, put this website in the crosshair. So I should actually clarify something. This was actually something that they've been kind of pushing for a little while now. It just gained new hype during this situation that went down over the last week. But it was about a week before that they were starting to push. This one article, such as this one from Press Progress, came out on November 10th, and it says, University of Toronto professors warn Jordan Peterson is planning a targeted harassment campaign. Is Jordan Peterson becoming too big of a problem for Canada's largest university to ignore? What I find a little bit ironic about this headline is they've tried to tear Jordan Peterson down. Even at the University of Toronto, when everything was going down, they were throwing him under the bus. His first fight was with the university. I mean, it had to do with Bill C-16, no doubt. But his real fight at the time was because the university was also implementing this, and he says, I'm not going to use those damn pronouns. The problem is people agreed with him, and he became popular. If they wanted to tear him down, they should have came at him hard a year ago when he was just gaining momentum, because then they could have torn him down without causing a huge kerfuffle. Suddenly, there would be something like 100,000 people these days who wouldn't know about Jordan Peterson. But they made a fuss. He went in the press and he explained his side of the story, and they started giving him so much attention that he caught the eye of Joe Rogan, a guy with a billion downloads on his podcast every month or something like that. I can't remember. It's something ridiculous. I think Joe gets something like 90 million downloads for like every podcast. He gets ridiculous numbers. The Joe Rogan podcast is insanely popular. So Jordan Peterson goes on there, and from there, it was like a space shuttle. He just took off in popularity. Now it's been a year and some odd months since that has happened, and they're coming at him again, trying to say that he may be a problem. Well, of course, this is not the university actually saying this is the professors, but the professors were some of the problem back in those days. There were professors going back at him then, and now they're coming back at him for him now. I don't know if these are the same ones or new professors, but because of this website, he's preparing a campaign of harassment. Is informing the public of what's really going on harassment now? Is that really what it is? Because that's all he's really trying to do. He's trying to inform every one of us about what's really going on behind the scenes in university. Because did you know about this problem was going on before he started blowing the sirens? I really wasn't. I kind of heard some things, but until I actually watched Dr. Peterson and listened to him about the problems on university, I was not aware to the extent of the problems. I knew there were some problem courses. I wasn't aware it was everything, that the whole fucking humanities system was fucked. I mean, when you get to the point where something like anthropology is being fucked like that, holy shit. So as this article from Press Progress goes on to say, it says, University of Toronto faculty issued a urgent warning to school administrators that a controversial professor popular with the alt-right is designing digital tools that will target and harass professors for ideological reasons. In a letter newly obtained by Press Progress, senior faculty members of the U of T's Women's and Gender Studies Institute expressed deep concern for the head of the university last month about a proposed website being built under the direction of Professor Jordan Peterson. And said they expressed deep concern to the heads of the university. The letter described a website Peterson is building for the purpose of identifying and ranking courses and professors that he advocates should be removed from the university. Administrators were warned that the website will generate harassment and lead to unsafe work and study conditions for students, faculty, and staff. Why am I not surprised that's from the Women's and Gender Studies Institute that are sounding the alarm on this? Because one of the main areas that this is going to target is those areas. See, when he says that they should be removed from the university, that is his opinion that they should be removed. He is not actually saying that this website is being... Hold on. I'm realizing I'm getting a lot of glare from my screen on my glasses, so... need to turn that down. Anyway, it's just his opinion when he says they need to be removed. He says they need to be removed because of all the harm that they cause. His opinion, but that doesn't mean that just because that he says they should be removed and he's making this website, that means they're going to be removed. I mean, I know that it's not the initial concern they're expressing that they'll be removed, but when they put it in those words that, Dr. Peterson wants to remove them from the university, they're using those words in trying to strengthen their position. But this website would solely tell you how deeply mired your university is in this, how deeply mired your professor is in this, and what sort of shit they're going to be teaching you. Things you need to know, especially in this day and age, when we know these days how fucked up the college campuses can be. But another reason they're expressing concern over this, because this could affect their funding. Because if people realize this and don't go to it, well, then nobody's going to fund women and gender studies issues. Although I think it'd be a good idea just for the sole fact that what job is there for you once you complete a gender studies diploma, certificate, or a women's studies one? What job is out there waiting for you? Nothing. Nothing. You can't use these certificates, these diplomas. You can't use them to generate any money. You can't start a business based on gender issues. You can't start a business based on women's studies any more than you could with one based on men's studies. It's just, there's no market in it. These are bullshit degrees that people have time and time again said they went to school for, and then were completely disappointed with the sort of education they were given, and completely disappointed how much money they put into it to get nothing in return. Going back to this article, it says, since donning the mask of a free speech warrior, Peterson leveraged his publicity to become a cult hero to the alt-right and generate over $500,000 in online donations, regularly raging against women, marginalized groups, and an imagined enemy he calls postmodern neo-Marxism. Okay, first off, Peterson did not put himself into the position of a free speech warrior. He was put there by everybody else. People like me, who liked what he had to say. And because we liked what he had to say, I mean, Peterson is a guy of responsibility. So because we liked what he had to say, he stayed in the public eye. He is a man of impeccable morals and a man of impeccable responsibility. He stayed in the public eye because he had to fight the fight. There's a great line from Star Trek The Next Generation. In one episode, one of the characters who's an android, who creates another android, which he dubs his daughter, is going to be taken away by Starfleet, a government essentially.
But Lal is my child. You ask that I volunteer to give her up. I cannot. It would violate every lesson I have learned about human parenting. I have brought a new life into this world. And it is my duty, not Starfleet's, to guide her through these difficult steps to maturity, to support her as she learns, to prepare her to be a contributing member of society. No one can relieve me from that obligation, and I cannot ignore it. I am her father.
Then I regret that I must order you to transport Lal aboard my ship.
Belay that order, Mr. Data.
I beg your pardon.
I will take this to Starfleet myself.
I am Starfleet, Captain. Proceed, Commander.
Hold your ground, Mr. Data.
Captain, you are jeopardizing your command and your career.
There are times, sir, when men of good conscience cannot blindly follow orders.
And this is the sort of thing that Peterson did. He acted when he needed to. He saw a problem. He voiced a concern because no one else would. That takes bravery, man. That takes a lot of bravery because not many people can do something like that. Then they move on to make reference to do with the alt-right. The reason they say this, now, I would not be surprised if people in the alt-right did like Peterson. I really, really wouldn't. However, Peterson's support ranges from all over. They range from the right to the left. I'm a liberal. I support what he says. I could find a conservative who supports what he says. I can find a leftist who supports what he says. And I can find a far right person, an alt-righter who supports Peterson. He ranges from all over. But the main reason they're saying he's associated with the alt-right is because his association with the Kekastanis. Because Peterson, in one of his videos, ended up wearing a frog hat. And, you know, we know Pepe the Frog. And for everything that he's done, he's been featured many times on those red pill videos where they just they have him saying something, like dropping a truth fact, and then have some music, some Thug Life music come up, and maybe some red pills, you know, those sort of YouTube videos. Featured many times on those. Lots of memes of Jordan Peterson. So because of this, and because Kekastanis are dubbed alt-righters, even though, yes, there are alt-righters part of them, Kekastanis are just people done with identity politics. They range from all over. They were started by Sargon of Akkad, a liberal. So really, this association with the alt-right is association with Kekistan, who are shit posters. Ooh, oh no, Peterson's associated with memers and shit posters. How terrible. They try and make it seem like they say he's got $500,000 in online donations. Number one, that's not like he just garnered that all at once. Like everybody's just like, here's $500,000. He started up a Patreon account to support his work, and people donated to him. And if Press Progress is that pissed about people who donate to Peterson, come talk to me. Because I support him on Patreon, along with Sam Harris and Gad Saad. 2 atheists and a Christian. Funny, I know. Plenty of people crowdfund in order to get the money that they need in order to do the work that they need because they can't do it. That's fine. I'm not crowdfunding. I decided not to, and I'm going to try not to crowdfund even if I somehow end up making it big. I'd like to, you know, just do this for the sake of doing it rather than crowdfund. But crowdfunding is perfectly legitimate. People donate to you. Nothing is forcing them to. They like what you do. They give you money. That's why the people who are popular these days are popular. Dave Rubin, Sam Harris, Gad Saad, Jordan Peterson. They may not be, like, I don't know if Gad Saad would actually be up there in terms of how much he makes, but these are reasons why they're popular, because people are willing to give them money. We like what they have to say. So you can't look at it as if it's a bad thing. In fact, people should look at it and say, holy shit, if that many people are willing to donate money to him so he can do what he wants to do, then maybe he has something worth listening to. Or at least that's the impression it should give. I mean, fuck. I'll support Dr. Peterson financially as long as I can, and also Sam Harris and Gad Saad and the rest of them. I'll support them as much as I can on Patreon. And they'll make stuff I like, and they'll make stuff I don't like. But all in all, I like the work they do. I mean, fuck. A lot, actually, of this money that Peterson was getting on Patreon was funding his historical significance of the Bible series, which is still ongoing. That's fine. If that's what he wants to spend the money on, then that he has every right to spend the money on it, because he's earned it. We feel he's earned it, so we gave it to him. And again, I'm not somebody that would listen to a Bible series. I'm an atheist. I don't care. Spend the money the way you want. I like the work you do. That's what you're supposed to do. There are podcasts by Sam Harris that just, they don't interest me because the subject is either way over my head, something I've never really had an interest in, or whatever. So I don't even listen to every podcast. I'll still give him money because I like the work he does. So the more somebody's making off crowdfunding and donations, the better work they're typically doing. Generally. Not always, but generally. And now he's raging against women and marginalized groups and an imagined enemy he calls postmodern neo-Marxism. Well, you can call it an imaginary enemy, but postmodernism and neo-Marxism are very real theories. So you could say that, but if the theories hold up to what is actually happening, so if people say this is postmodernism, this is neo-Marxism, and the way these people are acting corroborates with these philosophies, then no, it's not an imagined enemy. This is not Dr. Claw from Inspector Gadget or some shit like this that we're talking about when we say an imaginary enemy. And again, he does actually say enemy as if they're the enemy, like some sort of target we have to go after. When he does say, you need to take out neo-Marxist social justice warriors, tear down their philosophies. He's not literally talking about destroying lives. But this philosophy, this postmodernism, neo-Marxism, is a very real philosophy, and it's a very real one that is infecting us today. And even if, let's say, he's wrong about it being postmodern neo-Marxism, it is some philosophy that's infecting us today, and really he makes the same point. All you'd have to do would change the words around. But they don't like it because it insults their feelings. It insults their political philosophies, their social philosophies. And dropping truth bombs, telling stuff as it is about women, men, race, religion, marginalized groups, they say. You don't have to like it. But the problem here is Press Progress is trying to present it as if these are all lies. None of this is true, Like he's saying maybe that, women aren't created completely equal as men. Well, no, nobody is created equal. The whole point of equality, even when they say things like all men are created equally, things like that, men and women are equal. Nobody is saying we're 100% equal as in, oh, well, you're born a man, you're born a woman, you can lift as much as I can, or you can run as fast as I can, or as good at physical activities as I am, for instance. What we mean is we should treat each other equally. Don't treat a woman like a second-class citizen because she's a woman. Essentially, it was more about offsetting the problems of society. It's about changing the way we are and how we treat people. It's not supposed to be a literal fact that men can actually do anything women can do. See, yes, we can do it as in we have the opportunity to do it. That doesn't mean we're as good as each other. I mean, if somebody, a guy or girl, really needs to, let's say, cry it out, let's say, for instance, and they need a friend there, somebody to lean on during that moment, how many of you would choose men? And again, if they're men, how many of them are straight men, like your average guy who plays sports, your average guy? How many of those would you choose? You probably choose a man or a woman would probably choose a woman to be there to help them in that time. We could both do it. That doesn't mean we're as good at it. If you're going to move from one house to the next, are you going to hire 3 burly men? Or even if it happens to be 3 burly women? The men generally will be able to lift more. And that has to do with biology. And just because a group is marginalized does not mean you can't talk facts. Yes, there may be people that have problems with Islam. And we have a lot of Muslims here who might feel marginalized. But that doesn't mean we can't talk facts, such as a lot of terrorist activity are performed by Muslims these days, like things like that. But no, now it's all about feelings. Now, because of this whole situation, these professors making such a big deal out of it, he decided to put the website on hold. He really doesn't need any more criticism, any more reason for people to go after him now. He ended up putting out a poll on Twitter where he asked people about this and, you know, what their opinions were and whether he felt that doing this sort of website was justified. That if people are willing to go out and stand by their opinion, then don't you have the right to, you know that, to put it on a public platform? And I actually said yes, because this is actually a different situation, because I was thinking that some people might make a comparison to this to the whole Red Pill Black episode that went on with the social autopsy, where she was making a doxing website. It was different in these situations, though, because here we're talking about a group that goes out publicly and stands by their word underneath a banner. So essentially, they're already publicly identifying themselves. You're just compiling it. And the difference is that Candace wanted to take anonymous accounts and attach them to people's personal information, so that way you could figure out who anonymous people were. This is already people putting their points of view out in public, but he wants to be able to do it for universities and professors. So that way, the rest of us know what we're paying for and what we're going to be offered in these classes. Now, will this sort of website cause, a harassment issue, such as they're saying? Something like this makes it always possible for a harassment issue. But in the end, the way I look at it, essentially what Peterson is doing, he's just making available to the people what they're going to be offered inside these classes. Because if they're going to push postmodernism, neo-Marxism, that sort of point of view, well then really that should already be available to every single person applying for it. Not that necessarily it says that, but they should be able to know what's going to be offered. And if you have this website, which pretty much gives you a rank, it's like how far down the rabbit hole you go, then really it just seems that these teachers are more scared to stand by what they actually teach in these classes. Why that would be, probably because whether it's because their position is so weak, or whether it's, as people have said before, that these sort of people don't want to talk, that talking is actually seen as a weakness to them, which you might be able to believe when you look at people like Antifa, who are just impossible to talk to. I think this sort of website is actually pretty necessary. And again, it's just a compilation of what these teachers and universities are teaching, so it shouldn't be a problem, as in that's going to foster harassment. The reason they say this, I think, is just another slander against Jordan Peterson that'll foster harassment. Plus, these days, harassment is everything. You say something mean to me, you're harassing me. So, I've actually talked about Jordan Peterson for longer than I intended, but just as a guy that I support, like one of the people these days that I support a lot, a guy that I like and a guy that I see getting slandered all the time, it just really pisses me off whenever I see something like this going around. It pisses me off that this guy's got to go through it. It pisses me off that we can't even have an honest conversation these days. And in my opinion, Peterson is one of the people that gets slandered against the most these days by the other side. So whenever I can come to his defense, I would like to. I would do this again too for just about anybody else who I support big time. Gadsad gets into little things every now and then, but he always handles himself. He never blows up in this huge thing. Sam Harris has had a few incidents in the past, but nothing I was podcasting at the time, but that's another guy who sometimes gets shit on by the left, and I would gladly come to his defense if ever he went through a situation. Not, of course, he wouldn't be put in a situation like this, but he would definitely come and rub people the wrong way. But anyway, I want to move back to a little bit more politics before we run out of time on the podcast. And this was an article that came out of Huffington Post, and I am not reading it for you because I'm trying to use it as a legitimate form of information. I don't trust Huffington Post that much. One of my buddies who took a political science class had his teacher apparently told him that Huffington Post is a very uncredible source. This article I wanted to read because the Democratic Party is going to shoot itself in the foot, in my opinion. This article came out on Halloween of this year, 31st of October. And anyway, as it says poll, Democrats want to ditch their leaders and move to the left. They're right. The party would be best served in embracing its more liberal wing rather than appealing to an ever-dwindling group of centrists. First off, I don't like the fact they said they're liberal wing, while yes, the left is the liberal wing. What I don't like about them using that is when you're talking about ditching your centrists, you're giving up the rest of your liberals. So you can't really call yourself a liberal wing anymore, because a liberal position is a center-left position to hold. And that's sort of my problem when I've said before that the word liberalism is just thrown around quite liberally. I know, bad joke. But just that everybody will say, well, liberals, or I'm a liberal, when it's more leftist point of view. It's whatever, democratic socialist point of view or something like that. But liberal is a very encompassing of the left term. Same as conservative, I would say used to be, but that's really sort of changed, I'd say. Now people are much more like far right, new right, Christian conservative, social conservative, things like that. But liberalism is still a blanket term for the left. But the Democratic Party, especially in this last election, really moved away from its liberal roots. I mean, I don't want to call Hillary Clinton a liberal at all, because she'd be a terrible example for a liberal. Oh God, to think that she may actually be somewhere in the same camp as me. Oh God. But Bernie Sanders was the rising star, and people are done with Hillary Clinton and establishment Democrats, especially after they tried to rig the election. It's well known that she rigged it in order to win over Bernie Sanders, because she would have lost to him, and then he would have gone up against Trump, which is funny because it looked like Bernie Sanders had a much better chance of beating Trump than Hillary would have. Then again, those are polls, so things could have changed. And I mean, the day of the election, I can't remember which poll, but it had Hillary Clinton winning at 95%, and in the end, it switched throughout the whole day and just went down until at the very end of the day it was 95% Trump win, 5% Hillary win were the polls. So you can't trust the polls. But Bernie Sanders was without a doubt super popular, and he brought democratic socialism and socialism back into the Democratic Party. He made it popular again. And this is some of the problem, is because now we have an echo chamber of leftism inside of the Democratic Party, not of centrists, liberalism, and you can even get some center-right people that would vote Democrat over Republicans. So you can get a little bit of diversity in there of ideas. But now you're going to take that all away, and you're going to make the Democratic Party an echo chamber. That, and you're forcing everybody who's a liberal to either conform to what you want or go the other side and go towards the Republicans. Again, they say there's dwindling centrists that support, but there's a reason that it's dwindling. It's dwindling because they're pulling away from a centrist position, which is what they're supposed to be. In fact, I remember a while ago, like probably 10 years ago maybe, or something like that, I remember reading this. But it said that American politics is farther on the right than the rest of the world, so that the Democratic Party, despite the fact it was their left-wing party, was actually more right-wing than most other right-wing parties. Like, example would be like they would say like, Democratic Party is more conservative than the Conservative Party of Canada, but they're America's left wing, that sort of thing, as an example. If that was really true, that has completely changed in a few short decades. Now it's like the Democratic Party really has a heavy leftist influence, a heavy socialist influence. Bernie Sanders was a guy that I was supporting off the beginning of the election, and my support for him started changing over at the time I was starting to make my progression. It was about the beginning of the American election when I was making my progression, my politicals change. So Bernie Sanders was who I supported initially. I began learning about socialism and communism, and that's when I started losing support for what he wanted. I still wanted him to win over Hillary Clinton. Then he lost. Okay. And I would say for me, my support was pulled from Bernie just altogether because of when he lost, he endorsed Hillary Clinton. This, to me, sort of seemed like he was going against the very things he railed against. I mean, even during the campaign run, he talked about all the terrible things she did, how she took from the donors. She was really no better than Trump in that regards. He shouldn't have endorsed her. He should have backed out at that point and just been like, I'm not endorsing anybody. Or endorse Gary Johnson over the two, even though he would be more right-wing than Hillary. But he's just the third party that everybody was like, fine. We'll vote for you. But when he put his support behind Hillary, I really backed away from it. Now, that being said, I did at the time when, after Bernie lost, I put more support into Hillary, but fuck, I hated it. It was not, I wouldn't even say I endorsed her. It was just, if one of them had to win, I thought Hillary Clinton would be the lesser of two evils. Near the end, when it actually came down to the vote, I wasn't so sure anymore, just because I learned a lot more about her during the election run. Things I didn't know before. And she just really did seem like an awful person. I guess I was a little late to the party on that one, but I never really looked into Hillary Clinton. I never really cared about Hillary Clinton. And then until the election time, I knew who she was. I'd heard of her, but I never really cared. But what are the liberals supposed to do now if the Democrats are moving away from their centrist position? Because at that point, a Republican conservative position actually does support a more liberal position than a heavy left position, I would say. Because in the end, a lot of things that conservatives want would be, while it would be against the modern day liberal beliefs, such as maybe the welfare state or something like that, they would still support what you're looking for, a capitalist society, a pretty fair and equal society. There's just things that you would maybe not like. Maybe you're pro-choice and they want to have a pro-life country, so maybe that you wouldn't like or something like that. But a socialist one, a heavy leftist one, would be one that demands obedience, or as we've seen many times, it's going to get torn down. This is one of the things that led people to Trump, is that they were done with this heavy leftist influence, this heavy equality influence, you know? Everybody has to be equal no matter what. You know, everybody who's not white and male is, you know, being fucked over by the system. This is what led to Trump. So if the Democrats move even farther to the left, ditch their leaders, their establishment leaders, which again, people might like that they ditch their establishment leaders, but make the move to the left, I think that unless Bernie Sanders is leading it, and Bernie Sanders is old, he's not going to be in politics forever, then we're going to see a heavy lashback against it. So this is actually a short-term popularity boost for the Democrats, because more people will be willing to support him who are on the far left. They lose their support on the far right, but then when we actually lose somebody who was managed to rally the people like Bernie Sanders, and we're left with just a nobody leader who's trying to run a socialist party, I think the Democratic Party is going to crash and burn. They're already going downhill, and their solution is go farther to the left. It's like driving your car to a ravine and putting more gas into it, hoping to stop. But over recent years, I find that the Democratic Party has really not been playing themselves well. They won under Obama and they did well, but their game isn't working anymore. See, one thing about Obama is that the identity politics and stuff, it could work. You could sort of swing the attack ads to make it seem like it's going against Obama because he's a black man, for instance. But once he's gone, their next shot was with Hillary, and people knew Hillary. Most people. Again, I said I was late to the party, but people knew about Hillary. And when they've known what she's like, she's been in the spotlight for a long time, they couldn't play the same cards they wanted to. It's because I'm a woman. In fact, you know what? They played that in, I think it was 2008. Maybe it was, 2008, when she was going up against Barack Obama for the Democratic nominee. She played the woman card. She ended up, getting teary-eyed and crying over some bullshit, and then people accused her of making crocodile tears, and everybody came to her defense of, oh, you're just criticizing her because she's a woman. No, it's because people knew that she was a bullshit artist, even back then. I think there's a reason Hillary Clinton didn't get the nomination back then, and that's why she had to go to the extreme she did this time, that she had to actually rig the Democratic election to win, because people didn't like her that much. I've heard some theories that she may have tried to steal states from Trump, and no proof to back that up. I would not be surprised. I really wouldn't. So people are done with establishment leaders, but people are not done with the centrist position of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party is going to shoot themselves in the foot by doing this. So on a little bit more of a local note, it seems that maybe Canada might be starting to get really fucking tired of Bill Morneau and Justin Trudeau's bullshit, because it appears that Bill Morneau is now going to be investigated by the Ethics Commissioner. This has to do with everything that's going on with his tax plan that he's been introducing over the last couple months, and then his involvement with Shepherd Morneau, like still having the shares, which he didn't disclose. When that was discovered, he sells off a significant portion of his shares, but he still kept a good portion in his back pocket making money. Then more controversy is coming out about him being involved with Morneau and Shepherd, that to the point where the Ethics Commissioner, again, launches a commission, so Bill Morneau sells off the rest of his shares of Shepherd Morneau. I'm really glad to hear this, because it really seemed to me like it definitely seemed like Morneau was using this to his advantage. Just the fact that pension plans belonging to Morneau and Shepherd were showing up in all the places where they were going to be hitting the small business tax the most. That's suspicious enough. And the fact that so many of the policies that him and Trudeau want to push would benefit Morneau and benefit Trudeau through this. Trudeau has himself in bed with a lot of rich business owners, but he's trying to present them off as average Canadians. I mean, if you even think about the Governor General that was appointed recently, Julie Payette, and I honestly have nothing against her yet, like as a Governor General, but she's an astronaut. She's an astronaut. She's not an average Canadian. She's not somebody that just kind of went into politics or spent their life doing it, or just, cared so much they wanted to go into politics. She was an extraordinary woman. Only a few people get to go to space in a generation. We have Aga Khan, his involvement, who owns a goddamn island to themselves. We've got the Paradise Papers, which show that people who are close to Trudeau are sending millions of dollars offshore to avoid the taxes. Meanwhile, small Joe Blow is staying here in Canada, keeping their money here, and is forced to foot the bill, essentially. So it's nice to see that we might get something out of this, But at the same time, somebody like Trudeau, to get where he has, and I actually do believe that he's a guy who just loves the power trip. That's part of the reason the way he is. Somebody like Trudeau is not just going to let an investigation go on like this. Somebody like Trudeau is going to manipulate it in some way. Force the investigation the way he wants. I really hope that people are keeping a close eye on this, whether this be government watchdogs, other political parties, whoever. I hope that we're keeping a close eye on this, because I definitely see this ripe for manipulation. At this point, Bill Morneau hasn't had much lashback for everything that he's tried to push. The best he's had to do is sell off his shares, which, oh no, you still try to keep millions of dollars worth of shares in your pocket, and you only sold off the rest after you were being investigated, which maybe for him it's supposed to be a public move, as in, okay, fine, you know, I'll sell off my shares so that way to prove whatever, to show in good faith, you know, that this is not what I'm doing. But at the same time, maybe it's trying to get rid of evidence, getting rid of the shares. I don't know what sort of evidence offhand, but somehow I don't feel that Bill Morneau did this as a sign of good faith to us. If he really believed that what he was doing wasn't wrong, then why not keep the shares? If you say, whoa, there's absolutely no conflict of interest here. Again, he's different because he's a public figure, so these sort of things do come back to affect you. It's not like if I had this in my personal life, let's just say. But all in all, him and Trudeau have been caught in too many lies. We've seen too many attachments to rich donors. We've seen how even this tax that was being offered by Bill Morneau and Justin Trudeau, and sorry, I mean the tax changes, we even see how that would have benefited them. Kept them rich. Everybody else would have, again, they say it's the small-time business owner that is stealing from the Canadians instead of Justin Trudeau and his friends. How very convenient. And in fact, it actually seems like a very common tactic, which is you try and make people fight inwards, so that way they don't realize just how screwed over they're getting. At least that's the way it seems to me. I don't really believe that this sort of tactic, and the way that Justin Trudeau deflects, I don't really believe that these are tactics used, aside from meant to be divisive tactics, while at the same time claiming that's exactly what the other side is trying to do. He has time and time again accused the Conservatives of using divisive tactics when they're being critical of him. These are common misdirections, common deflections. In fact, he's not even good at them. He's so obvious in the way he does them. People who are good at deflections are subtle, you know. They can slowly ease you in one way. And if they're very good, they will ease you in a certain way before you've even asked the question. They'll set up the narrative in some way in order to get you leaning in the way they want. Trudeau just full out comes up and it's just so obvious that he's deflecting, so obvious he's not answering the question, that it's pretty much ineffective. That even a 6th grader with no training in lying can see that he's trying to deflect questions. The other problem is he does it so damn often, it's easy to see his tactic. I don't even watch Justin Trudeau speak that much. I don't even watch Question Period that much, and I can see this when I watch that. So when more information comes out about the investigation, I will definitely be talking about it on the podcast for sure. Again, this wasn't a very political one because, I don't know, nothing I was really interested too much in talking about in the political sphere. And like I said, whenever something like an attack like this happens on someone like Peterson, I like to get my word in, and I usually have a lot to say. Oh geez, the guy who speaks solely on the podcast has a lot to say. Ooh. But the next time I come at you, I will actually have a new set of clothes. I'm looking forward to it. It's supposed to come in tomorrow. Going to have my logo and everything on it. It's going to look nice. Well, it'll have my name on it. It doesn't necessarily have my logo on it because that was fucking expensive. But soon I'm going to... it's got my It's got my podcast name on it, and soon I'll get one with my actual logo on there. I can't wait for that, but I'm looking forward to that. I've also filmed 1 or 2 episodes that I'm keeping on hold for now, because now that I'm back at school, I don't know what the situation is going to be like, how much hard we're going to have to work, how busy we're going to be in order to catch up. Today wasn't too bad for me, but it was also a class that it wasn't a very heavy class, essentially. So I don't know what things are going to be like. So at some point I will be releasing those, and you'll be able to recognize it because I'll have a longer beard, and I also won't have the chair with me. And for that and I know for at least one I filmed, I was just talking to my wife. We just got on a few different subjects, one of them being mental health. Talk a little bit about recent events and mental health and our experience with it. That'll get released soon. I just don't know when. I'm kind of keeping it until, I get a bunch of work dumped on me and I got to take care of that, and I don't have the time to record, film, edit, all that shit. But anyway, I want to thank you all for joining me on the podcast today. I'm Adrian Lloyd, and this is just my stupid opinion. I'll see you soon.